Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Catherine Mattice. I'm the founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We're an HR consulting firm focused on building positive, thriving work environments. We often actually go into very toxic work environments and turn them around. And so please do post a comment in the chat. Where are you from? We'd love to hear. It's always fun to see people from all around the world here joining me. Today I'm with Jon Alarcon. You're gonna have to say it, Jon.
Alarcon.
Alarcon. There we go. Jon is one of the co-founders of Worklyfe, which is a super cool new kind of app that your employees can use. We're going to talk about employee motivation and rewards, and with inclusivity and diversity, being super important always, and especially now it's a hot topic. You all have figured out a way to make sure people are being rewarded in the ways that we want or that they want. So nice to see you, Jon. Thanks for being here with me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone as well. Thanks for having me on today, Catherine.
Yeah, and so just a little on your background. You're the previous head of customer success and account management at Blueboard. You launched 400 plus employee recognition programs over almost 7 years. So you've got some background in doing this. So tell us a little bit about Worklyfe. I've seen it, but maybe the audience has not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one of the easiest ways to think of it is, we really focus on happiness, and we want to bring that into the workplace. And so when we think about, kind of the components of happiness, it's kind of an elusive and moving target. And it's different for every single person. It's different for every person in a company, and it's different for every person at different times in a company. So part of kind of the heart behind this is, having worked with HR leaders at, startups up to like Fortune 50 companies, it's a hard job to try to make everyone happy all the time. It's actually an impossible task because it's a moving target. And, a big part of what we really focus on is, how do we make what you would call, supplementary compensation, anything above like wages and, kind of your 401ks and health insurance, how do you actually make that inspiring? How do you actually make that spend that, helps people bring happiness to their life? And a big part of why we do that is because we really believe that happiness is a precursor for motivation. It's very hard to do your best work if you're not happy in life. And so, for better or worse, a lot of times people keep those things separate or outside of the workplace. And, we want people to really focus on what brings them happiness in life, help them uncover what matters most to them, and then encourage companies to spend their money in ways that are actually going to encourage those things. And so that's really what we're building, from a software and kind of process standpoint, is helping people uncover those things, and helping people kind of make those happen in their life.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, yesterday, actually, I just gave a presentation to the EDD. So that was fun, to all their managers around happiness at work. And I talked a lot about kind of that there's an element of employee engagement there. Happiness at work is not a huge hot topic, but of course, employee engagement is, and really coupling those two things together. And happy is an enduring state of mind, and it comes from all of those little moments throughout the day. All the time someone smiles at you in the hall, or you have a good call on Zoom, or something nice happens to you. It's not from buying a car, for example. I mean, yes, we're happy, but that's not an enduring state. You buy a car and then it fades away. And so I agree with you, is what I'm saying, that people are not going to be engaged if they're unhappy at work. And a lot of that happiness also comes from being appropriately challenged. So I love, what you're doing to say, here, we can appropriately challenge you with some stretch goals, some small stretch goals, some big stretch goals, and then reward you along the way. So it really is going to tie into that.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And, you brought up a word that has been a really kind of focus probably for the last decade in kind of the people space, which is engagement. And, I think for a long time, that's been kind of the holy grail, right? Is how do you get people to be engaged in the workplace? And I think one of the things that I've come to realize, working with a lot of companies, and also just in my own career, and being in leadership positions, being in individual contributor positions, is that a lot of the focus for companies to create engagement is only in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lens that they look at things through is, how do we get people, like, how do we make people happy at work? How do we
Right.
get people engaged at work? And what I think, either I think probably for maybe liability reasons, maybe because it's like a tricky subject to talk about, they're missing the whole rest of the person. That's like, what
Mm-hmm.
do they do with the other 16 or 14 hours of their day?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think if companies can actually broaden the scope of how they look at their people, what they'll find is that, hey, actually, there's some really kind of easy ways that we can support people and increase their happiness levels outside of work by just changing how they think about some of their existing practices. And so, to your point, engagement is definitely a huge part of what companies are striving for. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I would make the argument that, hey, some people, especially the last couple of years, everyone's heard the buzzwords like quiet quitting, great resignation, all that stuff. I think people are kind of like realizing that, hey, maybe it's not worth it, to give myself fully in the workplace. Maybe like I should focus more on me. And I think there's an opportunity for companies to differentiate themselves in the coming years, where instead of going back to just, okay, everything's fine now, let's get you engaged in the workplace. Like, there's a lot of opportunity for companies to say, like, hey, actually, we can do things a little bit differently, and it's not really high effort. And we can have a huge impact on people's lives, not just,
Yeah.
creating a place to work. So
It's so funny. I was thinking as you were talking, it's so funny that all these years, for centuries, people have been going to work, and for some reason, only now are we going, these are people who have lives outside of work. Maybe we should tap into that or care about that. It's so
yeah,
funny. But yeah, luckily we are continuing to move in that direction. And what's the outcome of employee engagement? Theoretically, a highly engaged employee is giving you more of themselves throughout the day, and they're making that choice minute by minute to give you 100% of themselves, versus if they're not engaged, then maybe they're giving 70% or 50%.
yeah,
But yeah, it doesn't matter if maybe I have a great workplace, but if I'm going through a divorce or struggling with something outside of work, I'm not going to be able to give you 100%, period, end of story. And so, yeah, to be able to influence all the parts of someone's life. And I am really glad to see that we're moving in that direction. And I've been saying a lot lately that, for example, work-life balance was never a thing. That was always the wrong word, because it insinuates that there's a kind of an off and on switch,
yeah,
depending on if you're at work or home. And really, it's work-life integration that has to be okay. That, I mean, for example, I came to work and told my team about something that happened last night that was very frustrating for me.
mm,
That's integration. It's not balance. And we've all been doing that. We've all been going to parties all these years, and people are asking what we do for a living. And we're talking about people we work with.
yeah.
And then we're at work, we talk about people we live with. And yeah, so elaborate on what work life does, because we're sort of alluding to it, but tell us more.
Yeah, so just functionally, high level, how work life works is, we start with the employee first. I think a lot of solutions in the HR tech space are built for the companies,
Mhm.
which makes sense. That's the buyer. But we kind of took a hard stance that, what, like, if we're going to build something to help employees, like, it should actually start with the employees. That should be the main focus. And so, functionally, just high level, how our software works and how our process works is, we start with companies, and we look at, well, what are you spending money on in your incentives,
Mhm.
in your recognition programs, and in some of your fringe benefits
Mhm.
programs,
Mhm.
and what is that actually doing for employees? And what we'll do is, start working with their teams and with their managers and with their employees to help uncover what we would call their personal happiness equation. So each person has variables in their life that affect their happiness levels. And so you mentioned like, hey, something happened last night that was really frustrating. Someone might be going through a divorce. Someone might, have a loss of a loved one. Someone might be in a really steady state currently. And there really isn't anything going on in their life that's challenging. And so everyone's kind of in a different state in life. And so for us, we want to help people kind of uncover like, what are the components of happiness in your life, and what are the things that you want to overcome or achieve or go do, whatever it may be. Let's actually surface those. Like, let's talk about that. And we use a really scientific approach to happiness. I know it's kind of a fluffy term, or could be perceived as that, but there's actually a lot of science on what influences happiness. There's a lot that we can draw from positive psychology, actually, and helpful frameworks that your Adam Grants and your Angela Duckworths of the world have studied, and they bring that into the workplace. So we use a lot of the same models to help people kind of understand, what is happiness, what does it mean for me, how do I define that, and what are the components in my life of it. And then we go to companies and say, like, look, let's actually just, for each employee, instead of having 5 different kind of point solutions for your wellness and for your mental health and for your so and so, like, let's actually just open a bank account for that employee, and let's just like fund that directly. Don't go buy gift cards. Don't do all this stuff. Like, just give it directly to employees for what they need and what they define as important to them. So functionally, we actually, from a marketing angle, we call it a work-life balance, just because it's a little bit, it sticks out a little bit.
That's the phrase. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so that's like their actual bank account that are funds for them to draw from to, go do these things or overcome these obstacles in their life. And so what we found is that employees really love the flexibility of that, and being able to kind of self-assess, and then also kind of self-enable and self-fulfill on the things, so that there's not friction with like dealing with reimbursements or having to have someone schedule it for them and things like that. And so functionally, that's how our process works. We, in addition to that, built software to make workflows easy for companies. So if you're running an anniversary program, like, there's automation for that. There's HRIS integrations, all the things that you would want as an HR leader, so you're not like manually rectifying payroll and stuff each month and stuff for this. But I think that's kind of the core of it. In addition, we'll focus a lot on inspiration for employees. What we found is that if you ask someone, hey, what makes you happy in life? It's a really hard question to answer sometimes. Not everyone has that self-awareness or have gone down that path of really kind of discovering what makes them happy. And so we'll spend time digging in with employees individually or in groups to actually uncover that. And we have some methodologies and frameworks to help with that. But ultimately what we want to do is kind of create this environment where there's actually no longer this separation where companies only focus on the workplace. They're able to understand, if the employee wants to share, what makes their people happy, and then again, just directly fund that. And it's just, we find it's a lot more effective and efficient than kind of guessing. So.
Yeah, I love that. So just to give an example, and Gian says that she loves this. The most important thing she could do is ensure the best possible so people feel happy at work. So thank you for sharing that. And Jacob, I see your question. I'm going to answer it in a minute, and I'm sure John has some thoughts too. But just to kind of share what I've seen on the demo, and definitely recommend everyone reach out to John and get their own demo. But for example, I'm focused on building wealth through buying property. So that's part of my life goals. So while I, get paid at Civility Partners and put money into a bank account, it might be cool if we had Worklyfe to, we're only 3 employees, so we don't have it, but to be able to see that coming through work, and that my manager can say, hey, you had a great presentation yesterday with that client, I'm going to give you $10 or whatever. And then it is integrated with, my work, versus paycheck comes to me and then I'm doing something separately, and then everybody can celebrate my bank account for my next home, that I want, my rental property that I want to buy. And so it just kind of really allows everyone to celebrate everyone's personal goals via celebrating work goals and stretch goals. Is that a fair description, John?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think you kind of alluded to is alignment.
Hmm.
One of the challenges that and Gene, it sounds like you've gone this path down this path too with your teams is, well, how do you motivate your people?
Hmm.
Like, how do you inspire them to do their best work? It's one, it's a challenging thing to do on an individual basis if you're running a team, but then two, as a company, it's nearly impossible to do it organizational wide.
Hmm.
And if you look at managers, one of the most influential relationships on an employee, and in terms of their actual engagement and their production and kind of their EX, like you mentioned, Gene, um, like that is an expectation of managers to find out what motivates them, but they don't
Hmm.
really have tooling to do that, or even a good place to put it if they
Or
are.
even training on how to do it, right? It's one of
Yeah,
those unsaid things that a manager is supposed to do, but that companies never actually elaborate on how to do it or the expectations. So
totally.
having a software, sorry, I cut you off, but having this software makes that very clear that this is what we expect, right?
Yeah, and no worries at all. You're 100% right. And so, one of the things that we really focus on that alignment piece is like, well, instead of say, Gene, for your team, having to like guess what their favorite restaurant is and go get them a gift card for that or something like, well, what if they just told you what motivates them? Like, what if you just had a place to actually understand each person individually and made that a focal point of your one-on-one, to
Hmm.
understand them as a human being. And then in addition, like what if they could like figure out paths internally to actually make those things happen? So,
Hmm.
some of our core use cases are things like sales incentives, right? And so, there's a lot of money that's spent or that sales leaders spend trying to figure out what's that next like latest and greatest TV to buy to offer as an incentive, or what's like that trip that we need to go put together. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily resonate for everyone. What
Right.
if they just want to like, spend more quality time with their kids, and that's what's actually motivating to them. And so there's this whole kind of idea of alignment of how can we actually surface and understand what drives people, and then
Hmm.
how can we help them search for ways to contribute internally more and more, inside the organization, whether that's through again, sales incentives, anniversary programs, spot rewards, like you mentioned, Catherine, and there's a whole slew of ways that you can do that. But it's all about kind of surfacing what people care about, aligning that with what the company is trying to accomplish, and then
Hmm.
tying those things together. And that's where we find that people are really kind of motivated and engaged.
Yeah.
I feel like,
Grace says, not everyone wants to be recognized with a Starbucks gift card or a lottery for a
yeah,
Rolex. Lauren's
yeah,
great. I've always said I would rather see the money in my bank account, but no one ever asked me, what do you want? Um, Thank you, Grace, for sharing that. And just to share a couple case studies from my side. Yesterday, when I gave that presentation on happiness, actually, I asked, put in the chat, what does happiness mean? And the answers were very different. One person said, I just love to dance. I want to be dancing.
hmm,
Another person, actually, several people said being with my family. Others were saying things like kind of it's an enduring state of mind. But that's an example. One person wants maybe an extra couple hours to hang out with their family. Somebody else wants to go dancing. And so then they can work towards that. And then I shared this story with you, John, when we met before, but so sorry, you've heard it. But my stepmom actually is a really great case study of spending a ton of money on something that your employees don't even want. So she owns a fantastic law firm. It's big. It has like 30 employees. She's not doesn't have any partners. It's her firm, and I really admire her. Being in HR, when I see her often, we talk about some of her HR stuff, right? And she was telling me that she was pretty frustrated that um, she had really done some crazy great things with the 401k. She's kind of old school. You got to have your 401k. But she was really disappointed. She was telling me that no one on her staff really even noticed that she was doing some above and beyond kind of contribution and stuff. So then I said, well, maybe they don't want that. Maybe somebody wants money for daycare, and it was like, how dare you say that? Everybody needs a 401k. But seriously, yes, I agree with you. And you just spent a bunch of money that nobody acknowledged that you had just spent, and you're hurt. And where if she had something like what you offer, then she could have spent all of that money on something that each and every individual wanted, for instead of being hurt.
Yeah, totally. You
I
brought
want to go back to Jacob's question
for sure.
because he said, "What's a good measurement for good challenges on a one-to-one basis?" Jacob, I think that's a great question, and I mean, the answer is kind of what we've been saying, right? That you've got to, as a manager, have ongoing conversations with your team members about what they're trying to get to, what's their 5-year plan for themselves in terms of their career. Is there something or a role or a job task in your organization that they want to learn, and then helping them get there, so then to say, well, let's start stretching you a little bit, and so that it really is very individual, but again, a lot of organizations don't train managers to do that, and everybody says you leave your manager, not your job. And that's because of these types of problems. So this is a great way for a manager to be in everyone's good graces.
Yeah. And maybe just to piggyback off that too, I think what you said is really important, like understanding what people want and like is it career progression, things like that. I think
Mhm,
where we've found like really meaningful and impactful conversations happen as well is if you are managing a team, is really understanding why they want those things. And
mhm,
that when we think about like motivation, when we think about engagement, that underlying why is what will actually drive progress to those things. It's what
mhm,
will keep them kind of working towards that. And
mhm,
one way to think of it is, if you ask someone like, "Hey, what's your career goal?" It's usually progression. It's usually like, maybe getting into leadership or things like that. But when you start to kind of uncover, like, well, why do you want those things? It's actually usually more, um, I want like higher comp so I can like do things like you mentioned, Catherine, like buy a rental house and build a kind of a passive income for myself. Or it's,
mhm,
hey, I want that position so that I have a little bit more flexibility over my schedule, so that I
mhm,
can you know leave at 2 p.m. to go watch my kid's baseball game. Or like what ends up happening is the underlying motivations for those things start to surface, and it's usually around this idea of like quality time, improving and things that improve happiness in their life. And so what I'd encourage you, Jacob, is that as you have those conversations, understand what people are striving for, but then dig in maybe one or two layers deeper to understand, like, why is that important to them in their lives, and you'll find some real treasure there. I
mhm.
promise you.
I love that. That's a great point. I'm thinking about one of our clients that we had to break up with because they weren't following our advice. They had very unhappy employees. But thinking about some of the star employees who worked there, and if somebody had asked them, why do you work so hard? Why do you want to be promoted to director level? It can't possibly be because you enjoy working 110 hours a week, because
Yeah,
that's what's going to happen when you get there. So tell
yeah,
me, I know that's not what's motivating.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
here's what's gonna happen. Your life's gonna be real hard. Are you sure? Yeah. So
totally.
I love that.
One other thing to think about, and this is a tough pill, I think, for a lot of like leaders and companies to swallow. Um, I think it's okay if someone's goal is, I want to leave, like I
Hmm.
want to do something else.
Hmm.
Um, just to share an example of one of our customers, um, they have a sales rep that is kind of a chronic underperformer. And he's like on a pip, off a pip. It's been like a 2.5 year thing. And he's like always just kind of like barely done enough
Hmm.
to like
Get
stay
through the
employed.
pip. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what was interesting is it's a really known thing that, well, the reason why is because what he really actually wants to do in life is buy a food truck and like run a food truck business.
Mm,
And the reason why he got into sales is like, how can I make like as much money as possible to like go have a nest egg to go do that? And
mm,
it was a really interesting conversation because normally what a company would think is like, well, how can we get him to work harder? And, should we get rid of this guy? And like, and actually a different way to look at it is like, hey, look, this guy is, just kind of more context. He was spending, nights and weekends trying to launch an apparel company as a side hustle so that he could, get money to go buy this food truck. And it's like, gosh, what if instead you created an individualized incentive for that person where it's like, hey, look, if you sell an extra 50 grand this quarter, we're going to give you X amount. If
Mhm.
you sell an extra, like, 150K this year, like, we're going to give you this amount. Like, how much more motivated, engaged, and focused on your business would that person be
Yeah.
if, like, they actually, if you carved a path for them to leave your company? You know what I
Yep.
mean? Which is, like I said, that's a really tough pill to swallow for companies to think of things that way and think of their employees as like, hey, they're not going to be here forever.
Mhm.
'Cause it's so ingrained that attrition is bad, retention is good.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
one way to kind of think of it is, well, what if, for the 2 years that your employee is there, what if they were really highly motivated and gave you their best work for those 2 years?
Mhm.
How would that be different than, if they, stayed there for 4 years and gave you, like, 60%?
Mediocre. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I bring that example up because, again, when we think about motivation, when we think about why, I think companies need to think a little bit differently on how they view their employees, and
Yeah.
by viewing them as individuals that are striving for happiness and fulfillment in their life. Like, the company can actually be the hero to make that
Yep.
happen. And how much more, kind of emotional, like, positive affinity, are you going to generate for yourself as an organization by actually investing and making your employees, kind of life goals come true? Like, it's really powerful. So
Yeah. I love where this conversation is going. We had she started as an intern. She was going through at SDSU to get her bachelor's in business with an emphasis in HR. And everyone on my team, because we're small but mighty, we all do marketing. We all have marketing ideas. We all create lead magnets, So it's a big part of us. And we're fun and punchy, as you can see by all the pink around John and I. And so she started, she was doing a lot of these things where it was like we were creating something for a client, and then it's like, ooh, this should be a lead magnet. Let's revise it and put it on our website. And so she was getting all that work, and she came to realize she really actually liked marketing, wished she had actually gotten her degree in marketing instead of HR. So then I'm happy to have her go on. She got a job at a marketing firm, but that was all because she was working here doing marketing. And I was happy to have helped her find some calling that she maybe wouldn't have discovered had she gone on and gotten a job in HR writing corporate policies. She was doing the fun, punchy part of HR via doing our marketing. And I also, lots of things coming together for me. I did a LinkedIn Live a couple of weeks ago where the person I was talking to was saying he had a client that referred to their employees who left as alumni.
mm,
So what you're saying, really changing the paradigm that we're going to hang on to people as long as we can, even if they're mediocre, because attrition's expensive. And then they're going to leave and we probably won't interact with them anymore. Versus, I mean, and think about the employer branding with having alumni that you supported as they went on to have their dream job. They're going to be telling people, hey, I like my person. I'm sure she's out there like, yeah, this is how I discovered marketing. And she still comes to our happy hours sometimes and stuff. No hard feelings. She's off doing something amazing. And so yeah, it's just recognizing that, and people are going to leave every 2 to 3 years anyways. That's just what the research says. So
yes,
I'm totally behind everything you're just saying. Help them go off and live their life.
yeah, totally.
So, well, I know we're out of time. This went by super fast. I looked at the clock and thought, oh, wow, we're almost done. So thank you, John, for being here. I see lots of other comments. So please do connect with both of us on LinkedIn. And John, tell us where people can go and look at Worklyfe. What's the website?
Yeah, so it's Worklyfe, so WORKLYFE.io. We're relaunching a new website tomorrow, so you're welcome to go right now. You can get in contact with us, but you'll see something different tomorrow. And then you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And if anyone's in the Salt Lake City area, I'm actually going to be speaking at a From Day One conference next Tuesday. So would love to meet you in person if you're around there. But looking forward to meeting everyone. You can also email me, jon@worklife.io. So.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. This was just a super fun conversation. I really appreciated it.
Awesome.
So
Well,
I look forward to being friends with you, John. And
yep.
goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next Thursday.